All right, so we've gone all season. We've trained hard. You guys have tuned in. You've done what you think you need to do to get ready, and yet things still go wrong in we've talked almost in detail in each different component, whether that's training your gut, whether that's how to travel to a race, carb loading, dehydration. Alan's covered that in great detail. So if you want to go back and re-listen to all of those, I highly recommend that. Today, what we're going to do is, all right, we've talked about all these things. Now I want to remind you, what might you be missing? What issues could come up? What might happen? How do you fix them? And then how we put it all together. At the end, just as a forewarning, I put together a checklist that I suggest screenshotting, saving for another day or as you're getting race ready, and just so that you have boxes to check. Obviously, you guys know Scott, Alan, myself, and we've got Jonathan on the call. I wanted to kind of review Alan's graphic. I think it's really fantastic. And again, if you haven't taken a screenshot of this yet, or it's been in our newsletter, on the blog, I think reminding everybody why we get gut issues, because this seems to be the thing that even when we prepare, even as we're going throughout the season, we get a lot of questions and feedback. And so Alan kind of divided it into three categories: lack of blood flow, increased stress response, and then the presence of the fermentable stuff in the gut. So if you're looking at it, you've got kind of that mechanical jarring, you've got reduced oxygen supplied to the gut, which damages the gut lining, which can lead to inflammation, illness, nausea, vomiting. It's that you're basically just shaking your body up, and it's not going to operate as well. You're asking your muscles to work, reduced oxygen, reduced blood flow, all of those things. So the mechanical aspect, the increased stress response. As your gut stops working, if you've got, you're nervous about your race, you're traveling, your gut hasn't been working as well, you haven't been absorbing nutrients, your body's you've been going lower carb potentially, so your body's not used to utilizing and digesting carbohydrates, that can potentially be a problem. And then obviously the bigger issue is if your gut just isn't healthy, if you have those FODMAPs, if you have digestive issues, if you're not eating the right things consistently, if you're not fueling your body properly. So poor gut tolerance of food and fluids, all of these components, just a reminder of things that could lead to gut issues. I think it's really, really a great graphic that shows just how complex our digestive system is, our gut, and what we're asking of it when we're doing these events. All right, so what might you be missing? You're getting to your race, you think you've done all of these things. My number one tip as we've gone through everything is to get organized and be strategic. You have a training plan all year long. The same should go for your nutrition plan. That means looking at, all right, if I know I want to do 10 carb tests, 10 sweat tests, getting out my calendar and talking with my coach and looking, when am I going to do those, so that you make sure that you check that box. It's knowing, all right, I'm really trying to eat better as my race is getting dialed in. Do I need new recipes? Do I need to food prep? Do I need to clean out the kitchen? Do I need to set a schedule? It's, all right, I haven't been logging my meals. I need to get back into the app and be better about that. It's really taking the time. We think we're doing everything right, but if we're not kind of nailing and hitting those big points, that's where we'll be missing stuff. Not neglecting the small things. We've had athletes that have said, I've done 15 carb tests and sweat tests, and I'm really doing this. It's like, great, that's fantastic. But then they haven't adjusted their hydration plan accordingly, or they're not, if they've done blood work with us and we said, yeah, you're low in vitamin D and iron, and they're not taking their supplements every day. If they're the psychological stress that comes along with training, and racing and getting to the big day. If you're one of those, like myself, that gets up to a race and can get kind of race nerves and anxiety, how do you prepare for that? How are you mentally, how are you strengthening yourself mentally so that on race day that doesn't get in your way? And then I think too, a lot of the times athletes are relying on old or inaccurate data. So if you're doing your carb and sweat tests, but you're only doing them in zone 1 and never at race pace intensity, if you're only doing them in your basement with a fan pointed at you, and your race is going to be in Kona where it's humid and hot and windy, that's not going to be the most reliable. If you're not doing brick sessions, if you're not doing long enough sessions, if you're not letting the data evolve. One of the beautiful things about the app is that as you are doing carb and sweat testing, after you do 3, then it takes that information and puts you into another box based on the data that you've input. So it evolves with you. It's important that you're putting all of that in. It's important that you're logging your nutritional information so that we can see, so you can look back and know, oh yeah, this was an awful training block. Well, I was under fueling that entire time. We do the well-being scores every day. It's important to fill those out and be able to go back and look, oh yeah, I was feeling great this time because I was sleeping, I was getting 7, 9 hours of sleep consistently. So it's not just about checking the boxes. It's about making sure that the data that you're putting in is actually worthwhile and useful. Now, some of I think we've touched on all of these before, but race nutrition mistakes. Again, you can get all of the things right and potentially be missing out on 1, 2, or 3 of these. And that's where those problems arise. Chronic underfueling. If you are not fueling your body throughout these big training blocks that you're doing, that's going to catch up with you. That's going to affect race performance. Not using your race fuel. I can't tell you how many athletes I've had that say, well, I'm going to use Morton on the course because they provide it and it's what I like, but it's too expensive. I'm not going to practice with it. Or, oh, I just have this left over from last season. I'm going to use this, but I plan on racing with this. Absolutely not. Train with what you're going to race with. And I know there's so many training sessions throughout the year. Yeah, mixing it up potentially in those earlier months. Once you know and have your race plan dialed in, mixing in other things, that's fine. But make sure that you are actually using what you're going to be using in the race. Not training your race nutrition. Some athletes, as we get closer, they think, I did a couple of videos about this, you can catch those on our Instagram, doing fasted training or high fat, low carb, because they're potentially working on that magical race weight number that they have in their head. Not doing heat adaptation prep. We have a sauna protocol or a hot water protocol, and not taking the time to do that, not doing the strength training sessions that you're doing, only getting focused on your race and not the bigger picture. All of these little components are those potential missing details that could get in the way come race day. So why do these issues happen? I like to remind people, change only happens when you actually change. Not using the app as it's intended. If you are just going in and looking at your macros for every day and only kind of focusing on that, but yet not doing the sweat testing, this is an excellent feature that you should be diving in and taking advantage of as often as possible. Not following through on the advice. If the app is telling you, and I have athletes that do this, that's suggesting either 40 grams, 30 grams of carbs an hour, or 60 grams of carbs an hour, or 90 grams. If the app is suggesting that you do that, there's a reason for that. It's either because we're trying to get you to that point, or because you've done these tests in the past and we're moving you up from one level to the next. If we suggest a snack right before a session, that's potentially because we want you to work on gut training and gut tolerability. if you're neglecting, if you're like, oh no, that's too close to when I'm going to, I'm going to run and that might upset my gut. Well, there's a purpose and a point. As long as you're putting the correct workout times in. Again, that's where not using the app as intended. I hope that by now everyone is entering their zones and entering the workout times and the duration. But when that information is correct, we are very specifically and succinctly making sure that you have opportunities and that you are pre-fueling, fueling during, refueling. So if we're giving you that advice, please try to take it. Not being consistent. Maybe practicing your race fueling a couple times, but never practicing that race breakfast, or doing it once or twice and thinking that this is working out for you. Like, okay, I'm pretty sure I've got it. It's doing it over and over and over and over again, so that come race day, you don't have to worry about it. It's second nature. You've done it 100 times. And then ignoring the red flags. If in the app you're looking at your sweat test and it's not green, it's red, if you're under hydrating, or if you're over consuming on things, if your carb tests are consistently low and you're not feeling well, and then you're not adding carbohydrates in order to fuel those sessions, if you're not sleeping like you used to, if you're entering your well-being score and your motivation to train has been low for the last 2 weeks, potentially a red flag. All of these little things that sometimes we forget are what can get in the way of us having a fantastic race. All right. And again, when you're looking at the app, and I know that those of us on this call, you guys are all pretty good about it, but the point of looking at, what do I have for the day? What are my macros? What's my snack? What am I going to have in session? And nailing all of those components as you go through, looking at your session details, making sure those are correct. During race season, now is the time to really be particular and really dial that in and nail all of these basics. All right, so what do we do to fix them? Want to say it's as simple as doing your carb capacity testing. Again, here are some screenshots from the app. Those of you that haven't taken the time to get in there and do it, it's very self-explanatory. Just start doing it any and all sessions that you can. Make sure you're doing it for the bike, make sure you're doing it for the run, make sure you're getting brick sessions in. So even the simple fact of going in and doing what we recommend or what we're asking you to do can help fix that problem. Heat acclimatization versus acclimatation, training outside, getting used to the heat, doing our sauna or hot water protocol. There are some big things, right? Practicing your race day breakfast, doing your carbohydrate testing, getting acclimatized to the heat. These big boxes that you can check that you shouldn't be kind of leaving on the table, that you shouldn't be ignoring. Consider these just as important as the training sessions that you're doing. All right, so how do we then kind of put it all together? I know we can't all cross the finish line and grab the tape, but hopefully we all get that PR winning performance. Okay, here's the checklist. I'm going to go through it all. These are all things we've talked about in previous sessions. Number one, I hope that I have stressed this enough. Use the app. It is a resource. It is a tool. It is only as good as the data that you are putting in and the feedback and the interaction that you have with it. So make a point as you're getting race ready to really be in there and taking the time to log your food, look at your macros, look at your training sessions, look at your carb and sweat tests, and make sure that you're getting that in. Completing, again, checklist. Have you done at least 10 carb tests, sweat tests for the bike, for the run, for bricks, zone 1, zone 4, different temperatures? Have you checked off all of those? If not, now's the time, get started. Gut issues. Are you having gut issues? Jump in, raise your hand. do a consult, watch our videos. Don't just let it go unchecked and assume, oh, my gut always hurts, I'll just put up with it on race day. We've provided plenty of information, and it shouldn't have to be an issue. Yes, we might not fix it if your race is in 2 weeks, but we can definitely help make some suggestions. We can improve, we can make it better. And obviously, the further out from your race, the better. Heat stress. What are your race conditions going to be like? Put yourself in that environment. I don't think it's going to be cold anywhere at this point in time in the year, but if you are going to be dealing with humid conditions and you don't live anywhere where it's humid, be inside, put one of those portable heaters in front of you on the bike trainer, wear warmer clothes, do the sauna or hot water protocol, find a situation to put yourself in so that you know what your body is like. Okay, checked. So far, I've done this. All right, hydration. Obviously, we talk about hydration in session, but what about the other 20 hours of the day? How are you hydrating? In the US right now, it is, in some parts, it is horribly, wildly, just very, very hot. And yes, while you're training, you might be good, but are you hydrating throughout the day? Are you making sure to get in enough water? Are you making sure to get in enough fruit and veg that also contain water? Are you hydrating so that you're ready for the session the next day? Great, box checked. Psychological stress. What do you do about race anxiety? What do you do about travel? If you're one of those people that does not like to travel, how are you going to prepare? I'm always nervous about my bike. I'm not great about putting my bike together. So anytime I have to travel to a race, I either do bike transport or I make sure that I have set up a local bike shop. So it's like, what things are going to stress you out coming up to your race that you can handle now so that they're not a big deal later? Do you worry about what you're going to eat when you're traveling? Okay, I did a whole webinar on it. Get prepared. It's a lot easier than you think. Anything that you can do to relieve stress and anxiety now as you're leading up to your race, the better. Cool, box checked. Carb loading. Have you practiced? Yes, we talk about it just being race week, but we want to see how your body does with that. Race week shouldn't be the first time that you are carb loading. During your big training blocks, we can put that in. Understand how you're going to get that. Scott and I did a session where we gave a bunch of tips and tricks on how to carb load, because the feedback people get is, oh, I can't eat 450 grams of carbohydrates. That's so much. And then they tell us, well, they're just eating bagels and pasta and rice. And while all of those things are wonderful, they're very, very filling and potentially very constipating. So what other ways can you get the carbohydrates in? Scott had an excellent quote where he said, eat like a child for 3 to 4 days. And by that, we mean drink juice, have popsicles. Alan talked about using maltodextrin. Dried fruit is excellent. Adding a little bit more at each portion. So instead of just maybe having a piece of regular toast, maybe do cinnamon raisin toast. That potentially has some more carbohydrates because there are raisins in there. Again, every little bit helps. And a lot of times when athletes carb load, they can have a bloated feeling if they're not used to it, if they haven't done it before. So getting used to that so that you know once race week comes, you've done it before, you know how you're going to do it, you're prepared. Race day breakfast. Please know what you're going to have for your race day breakfast. Maybe it's because I like to eat that this was just never a question for me. I loved practicing my race day breakfast. I knew what I was going to have in January for a race in July. It just, like, I like consistency. I like routine. I evolved it. I knew what I liked. I knew how I would get it. That's the other component. I had an athlete once that was like, that always made pancakes. And that was going to be his race day breakfast. Well, he was staying in a hotel and didn't, one, have access to kitchen equipment, but we could have potentially got around that with maybe some frozen pancakes that we could cook in the microwave. But like, think of how you're actually going to execute that breakfast. Are you going to have the resources to make it? Have you actually had it? And this is another one that I try to remind athletes. They'll do their, brick training sessions, and their breakfast might be at 6:30, 7 a.m. They start their training session at, say, 8 a.m. Well, race day, you're going to be up at 3:30 in the morning. Have you at any point in time during the season gotten up at 3:30 and tried to see what that's like? Because not only are you going to have race nerves, but 3:30 in the morning is a lot different than 6:30 in the morning. And if you haven't tried that at least once, what it's like to set your alarm, wake up, get all your stuff together, see how long it takes you logistically to wake yourself up, to make it, and then how you feel 2 hours later, really practice that, what it's going to be like. I recommend doing it not just on brick training sessions, but if you have some open water swims, it's the perfect time to do it, because that replicates what you're going to be doing on race day, right? The first thing you're doing is going out for an open water swim. So if you know your swim start, rolling start, 7 a.m., you're going to be up at 3:30, 4 o'clock, set your alarm, wake up, have your breakfast at 4 o'clock, and then see how your digestion feels. Oh, are you hungry at 6 again? Have you practiced then having a gel, potentially with some caffeine, 15 minutes before, right at the start? Like that, the whole system. It's not just, I'll figure out what I'm going to eat, no problem. It's everything around planning that pre-race breakfast, timing, logistics, hunger levels, all of those things. All right, logistics. How are you going to carry everything? Where is it going to go? How are you going to eat it? Is it going to fit in special needs? When are you going to grab stuff? How will you refill bottles? If you have this great hydration plan, but you haven't stopped to think on the execution portion of it, not going to do us much good. All right, then the week of the race. Have you stopped to look? Again, let's check the box. What are my travel plans? What are my dietary plans? Okay, I'm going to be carb loading, so I should probably go to the store and get applesauce, juice, peanut butter and jelly, fruit, etc., etc. How am I going to be traveling on the airplane? How am I going to make sure that I'm getting enough sleep, that I'm not going to get sick the week before a race? Which kind of goes along with that packing and being prepared. I've had athletes that have, a lot of times if they're going, say, to Kona, they'll go a little bit earlier and they don't bring medications or supplements with them. And then they end up being 6-7 days without their iron, vitamin D, allergy medication, whatever it is that they take on a consistent basis, but didn't include that in their packing. Just being able to know not just what stuff you're taking, but what other things. Do you need to bring your protein packets? Do you need to bring a greens powder because maybe you're not going to be eating as many salads and veggies? Do you need to, are you one of those athletes that travels with a little mini blender? Like getting all of those things lined up. And then to Scott's point, have fun. Smile. It's supposed to be fun. Most of us are not getting paid for this. This is not going to be the legacy that we leave behind. It should be fun. And hopefully by going through this checklist and really dialing in everything and making it very almost mechanical and automated, you can go to the race and be like, I've done everything. I mean, how great would it feel to get to race day and go, I did everything I could. I did my training sessions. I ate well. I did my carb and sweat tests. I did the hot water protocol. I've practiced carb loading. I know what my race day breakfast is going to be. I have my travel lined up. I know what I'm going to be eating. And now I just get to enjoy it. I get to take in everything, everybody around me, all the excitement, and just go put it all out there. All right. I love this quote. I've used it before in presentations. Consistent action creates consistent results. Of all of the things that we've talked about this summer on getting race ready, ask yourself, what am I being consistent with? What am I being inconsistent with? And what can I work on from now until race day in order to have the best possible performance, the best possible race day, the most enjoyable experience? What can I be consistent on moving forward? All right. So, question time. Anything you guys think you would like to review, ask about, anything from the presentation? What are you good at? Like, I'm good at race day breakfast. What are some of the things that you guys think that you nail, or areas for improvement that maybe I can make suggestions? Okay. We'll leave it at that.
So I have a question.
Sure.
If I have been a poor student of the app, but I'm new to the app, so I saw that there's a podcast where he goes over, Scott goes over the use of the app. Is that a good resource, or is that going to answer all my questions?
I really will. I'm not just saying that to like pass it off. I find it very hard. Like, nobody does it better than Scott when it comes to diving and digging in. And that is an excellent resource. I think he even answered a question I had that I didn't realize I wasn't doing correctly. So yes, I recommend that.
Because I've been good about logging what I eat, but I've been bad at actually looking at the app.
How about you haven't been great yet at utilizing all of the things in the app?
Okay, I'll buy that.
There you go.
Well, if no one else has one, I got another one.
Okay, throw it out.
I got lots of them, boy. Well, again, back to the question about the 70.3 race.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to pack my bottles with water and or electrolyte solutions, and then carry the carbs in the form of chews or bars, is that a good way to go? Because for a while there, I was trying to carry some carbs in fluid form as well. What's a good strategy there?
Well, I think, Manny, you and I are going to be dialing that in on our call tomorrow. But in general, I find it easier, yes, to keep depending on how high your carbohydrate needs are. It's very hard to get 120 grams of carbs if you don't get some from liquid forms. I mean, you really have to kind of get your gut trained well to be able to take a consistent, 4-ish gels an hour, or chews or bars or whatever. But it's at the like 60 to 90 gram range. I think it's pretty easy to stick with gels and chews and then leave your bottles for hydration. I like that because the other component is, if for some reason your gut kind of slows down and you just can't drink anymore, if you were relying on having some of those carbohydrates as part of your race plan, then if you can't drink, or if you drop a bottle, then you're going to be missing out. So I like it separate for several reasons, but really for that one, because it's kind of, if you've got this bottle that has 60 grams of carbohydrates in it and you're relying on that, and then what happens if you can't drink anymore, if your gut's acting up, or if you drop that bottle? How are you going to make that up? But there are plenty of athletes that make it work. It's just, that's why you practice over and over and over again, so you know exactly how your body feels, what's best for you. Some athletes get, they get that, I call it gel fatigue. They say, I can't possibly, I'm 5 hours into my Ironman bike, I can't possibly take another gel. And that's when we're in those sessions and it's like, oh, well, remember, we practiced this, we did this at the 4-hour mark, you're going to have a bar, some real food, or we switch to a bottle, or, something, dried fruit, applesauce pack, something like that. Like that, we knew that was a problem. And so we addressed it and made a plan for it.
Okay. Because I on my race bike, I have the X Labs torpedo thing, whatever, on the front, and I've got a double bottle rack behind my seat.
Yep.
And then I've been experimenting with one of these running race backpacks. Very sleek, but it has a bladder, so I can fill that up with stuff. It has little pockets for gels. So I've been trying to figure out what's the best approach.
I love those. Always make sure, because some races don't allow the hydration packs. So just, again, this is a tip for all athletes. If you're training with like a race belt, but you don't plan on using it on race day, that could be a problem. If you're using a hydration vest or pack and the race doesn't, that's a disqualifier, or they don't allow you to have it, then you're in trouble. So just make sure logistically that you know what you can and can't do, and practice exactly what it is that you're going to be utilizing on race day. Again, I've had athletes say, like, they train with a bottle in their hand, and then they say on race day, I don't like carrying stuff, so I'm just going to rely on the aid stations. And I think, but we haven't practiced that at all. So again, doing in training what you're going to be doing in the race. Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to check on that, because I didn't even think that they would not allow one of those running backpacks.
It's not all, it's just, I know there's some I've encountered, I don't know, one or two here or there. I just want to make sure that yours is one of those that they're fine with it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Jerry or Esteban, any questions from your end? Oh, there's a camera.
I'll ask you a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Esteban. This is something that happened to me at a race I did a month ago. So I'm just curious. I guess my question will be, what would you have told me I could have done in the moment to try and correct?
Okay.
In case it happens again.
Okay.
So just for some brief background. So I did 2 70.3s, one in May, one in June. And nutrition went really well. I was like really happy with it. I nailed that. I felt great throughout both races. I did an Olympic distance in July, which is the one where things went a little sideways. And I think really what went wrong was the night before, rather than what I normally would have eaten. We wanted to go out for dinner, and I probably just overate and ate the wrong things. But what happened was, so the race morning, I woke up and I wasn't hungry. I didn't feel bad. And I had my usual pre-race breakfast, which is fairly loaded. And then I kind of did my usual routine, so it's an hour drive up to where the race site was. So then I always planned to take like a bar just before the swim. So I did that. I realized at that point that I was feeling kind of full. And then I did the swim, got on my bike, and I was like, I really am feeling full, to the point where I was uncomfortable.
Okay.
The bike portion has like a very long climb. Really, the first 6 miles is basically uphill, and it gets really steep where you're really pushing it. And when I hit that section, I thought I was going to throw up, which I've never felt on a race before. And so I dialed it back. I downed my power a bit, and I felt better. And I wouldn't say I had GI issues again, but clearly, like, my stomach was much more full than it had been. And I had, to that point, been sort of sticking to my plan. So having a gel as often as I thought I would, and all that stuff. And so I guess my question is, what should I have looked out for, and what should I have done differently once I realized that my stomach wasn't doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Okay. So let's do the easier question, or the easier answer. If we could magically go do it again from start to finish. So not in the moment changes, but in general.
Right.
Said potentially the dinner you had the night before.
Yeah.
Could have been an issue. I find, at least in my own racing and other athletes, Olympic distances, like, the speed and intensity is so much higher than 70.3. So potentially less fueling, and I would change my fueling in that instead of maybe that bar, I might have done a caffeinated gel, a little lighter, easier on the stomach, knowing, especially too, knowing that that first bit of the bike was a hill. Like the less, because again, depending on how hard you were swimming, if you had that, you know, because the swim is obviously shorter than it is in a 70.3. So if you had taken a caffeinated gel right at the swim start, then, you know, 30 minutes or so, that might kick in, be just about the time you wouldn't have like that bar on your gut, potentially, so you could start that climb. I'd definitely be hydrated. I may have even eaten a bit earlier and or a bit lighter that morning, especially if you woke up feeling full. Like, oh, okay, obviously I either had too much or whatever, my gut slowed down. So I potentially, like, there's a time to force feed, if you will, and then there's kind of a time to go, okay, this race is a shorter distance. It's easier to recover. I can get through with a little less. So I would say that would have been, and then in the race, like now we're back to, okay, we are where we are. We can't change it. What would I have done on the bike if I were you? I probably just would have hydrated, given my gut a chance to reset itself. You were smart to kind of slow the pace down a little bit, because the harder you work, that's just going to make that mechanical stress more, and your gut's just going to keep shutting down more. So yeah, slowing the pace down, potentially just getting some hydration in, giving your body a bit, and then maybe right at the end, potentially doing a chew or a caffeinated gel, like just something really light, really easy, so you have enough for that run. And
Thanks.
be careful the next.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's a really good point. I've taken to just, I don't really do Olympics that often. It's the only one I'll do this year, and I've taken to just doing what I do for 70.3s and figuring I'll do just less of it. But you make a good point that the intensity is different, and I did, like, I swam that swim as hard as I could, because it's shorter and the bike is a lot shorter, so I definitely don't pace as much. I'm just going for it. So I should probably adjust what I'm eating to reflect the intensity.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, I think the swim always surprises people. And I know this from my own swimming background. When you are really swimming intensely, it absolutely, like the difference between like a sprint and an Olympic versus a 70.3, that swim is so dramatically different that the amount of work you're doing, but also potentially the like stress on your muscles and gut is so much higher that it really does change appetite, digestion, utilization. Like that you're fueling for like fast, short, easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like like super fuel, like booster, like turbo boosters, because you're going so hard in that swim. And sometimes people take in more water when they're swimming fast without even realizing it. So there may have been some of that in your gut. It's just, it could have been kind of all of that combined too.
Thank you.
Great question. Do you have any more? What's the rest of the season?
I'm going to do a 70.3, a local one, in 2.5 weeks from now.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, that'll be it.
Okay. Well, hey, we know you can swim super fast in the Olympic distance. Just carry that on out. Just go all out on your swim in the 70.3. What do you have to lose?
Yeah, what could go wrong?
No, famous last words.
Exactly.
Well, good luck. I hope it's a great race.
Thank you.
Sure. Right. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you guys for tuning in on a Tuesday afternoon or early afternoon for the East Coasters. Always good to see you guys. And yeah, I think next week either Scott making up, I don't know if it's gonna be Scott or a Q&A, one of those two. So Thank you guys very much, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you,
All right,
Elizabeth.
thank you too.